Hello, and happy marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are well. Listen, I'm super excited that you are joining me today. We are having much needed conversation about the myths of Section 8 rental housing inspections. Before I get into it, again, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Carissa. This is what I do each and every Monday. I come on at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am live on Facebook. I'm live on LinkedIn. I'm live on YouTube. Want to say thank you so much if this is your first time tuning in. If you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go over to YouTube, smash that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to know when I am live and online. The information that I share today is not legal advice. I want to make that disclaimer. However, I am sharing the industry's top practices and tips for landlords, those who are new landlords, whether you're new, you're seasoned, or maybe you're a housing professional or a tenant. This information is provided with hopes of being clear, informative, and able to positively improve the rental community. And so today I felt it necessary to address and attack this matter because I've had some questions pertaining to the information that I'm going to share today. And so I'm dispelling some myths as it pertains to Section 8 rental housing inspections. I know that some of you are knowledgeable about the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. However, I also recognize, I know, and I understand that although you may be knowledgeable about the program, although you may be aware, there is still some sort of uncertainty when it comes to the inspection process. So first and foremost, the Section 8 program, formerly called Section 8, is titled the Housing Choice Voucher Program. And so if you have questions today as a landlord or as a tenant, any questions, any comments, remarks, or observations that I'm able to address while I'm live and online, please drop it in the chat box. I will respond to them accordingly. But today's session is all about myths as pertains to Section 8 rental housing inspections. If you find this information of value or if you feel like it's helpful for somebody else, please like this live, or if you're watching the replay, like, tag, and share it with somebody else who may also find it helpful. Sharing is caring, and we want to make sure that we are providing valuable information in the rental community. So today I'm going to get straight into it because, again, this is something that has come up. I've had lots of questions about the inspection process from landlords who are not as knowledgeable about the program or who are thinking about renting to Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher participants. Okay, so again, questions, comments, remarks, or observations, throw it in the chat box. So let me get straight into the 5 myths that I want to debunk today. Please apologize. I apologize. Please excuse me for my raspy voice. But let me get straight into it today because I want to answer questions that have already come in. All right. And so again, I'm talking through the myths. So if you are a market landlord, if you're a landlord rather, and you have tenants who are not in the Section 8 program, and maybe you're considering or you're thinking about renting to participants who hold a Section 8 HCV voucher, this is information that you definitely want to know. So please take notes. And if there's any other information that you would like for me to share or cover in an upcoming Monday, please let me know. I'm going to provide you with my email address a little later. That way you can reach me if I'm not online. I love to get your feedback. Please also let me know where you're tuned in from. If you're live, if you're watching a replay, if you are in the DC metropolitan area, if you're in South Carolina, if you're East Coast, West Coast, let me know where you're tuned in from. I love to know where my viewers are watching from. Is that all right? All right, so today, again, I'm delighted that you are joining me. I'm live on several platforms. Sometimes technology is not my best friend, but I promise to do my best to work through it on today. But I do look forward to making sure that this conversation is enriching as well as engaging. All right. And so here is one of the first myths I hope to debunk today, hope to provide clarity rather. And that's this. I know that some landlords who are not as knowledgeable about the Section 8 process, they think that it's okay to allow tenants to move in before the inspection passes. Well, that is something that you absolutely cannot do. I would recommend that you check with that housing agency to confirm that it is okay for your tenant to move in. Here's why. And I know that many of you, you take care of your rental properties and you have a strong belief and feeling that because you've put a lot of money into the rental property, that it's going to pass the inspection and that all will be well. And in many cases, that may be true. But unfortunately, that is not the policy of the program. And so you should never allow tenants to move into the rental property before you have been given permission or it has been approved for that tenant to move in. Because here's the danger in doing so. I have seen landlords and owners who have allowed tenants to move into the rental property, believing that it would pass inspection. And your belief or your idea of what might suffice may not meet the program requirements. And so if you allow the tenant move in before that the start of that contract or before the housing agency says, well, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, yes, you can go ahead and allow the tenant to move in, right? So if you do that, if you jump the gun and allow the tenant to move in, and let's just say worst case scenario, that unit does not pass inspection. Or maybe it passes inspection, but it's 15, 30 days later, or maybe a month later. I've seen some rental units that did not pass inspection for almost 3 months. The landlord allowed the tenant to move in, and then they asked the housing agency to pay for the rent from the time that they allowed the tenant to move in. Here's why you don't want to do that, because the housing agency will not pay the rent until that unit has been approved and passed inspection, meaning that you will likely not get that money. And the tenant, unless they agree to give you all of that rent money up front, or they agree to pay the full contract rent, the tenant may not have that money to pay you. And the agency, again, they're not going to go backwards. They're not going to backdate and give you that money. So you don't want to make the mistake by allowing that tenant to move in before the inspection passes. All right. Hello, Jennifer. Thank you so much for tuning in, beautiful. Okay, so here's the second thing. I've had owners who said to me, Carissa, I just purchased a property. It had to pass a housing inspection. I paid for a housing inspector to come out, and everything was okay in order for me to purchase the house or the apartment building. Well, here's the thing. Those are two different housing inspections, different standards. So under the Housing Choice Voucher Program, under the Section 8 program, there are federal regulations in place which denotes to landlords that it's a certain set of requirements that that housing agency is looking for. Okay, so some agencies are currently using HQS, which is Housing Quality Standards. Some agencies are now moving to Inspire, which is a new standard that HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD oversees the program. Again, it is a federally regulated program. And so the housing agency will use one of those two standards when they are sending the inspectors out to look at the condition of the rental property. Okay, now in addition to that, the property still must conform or comply with whatever the local housing codes are. So with the exception of Washington, D.C., all of the states in the United States, there are three sets of laws. There are federal, there are state, and there are local laws. In the District of Columbia, because D.C. is not a state, there are no state laws in D.C., but there are local laws and there are federal laws. Okay, so let me just put that in the way. All right, so depending on where that rental property is located, that would denote which standard that inspector must follow, and it indicates the practice that the inspector must adhere to. And so unfortunately, just because you have recently purchased a property And congratulations to you for just purchasing your property. For those of you who are investors, um, that won't suffice for the voucher program. And so you still will have to have a Section 8 inspector. And so the housing agency will schedule the inspection. They'll typically contact the landlord, the property manager, whoever's going to be responsible for making sure the property is available, to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, we're going to inspect the property today. We're coming out on X date. And so there is a criteria, there's a checklist that they're following. They're not just going to walk into the rental property and just look at the four walls and like, oh, this is nice paint, or these are nice accessories, or the lights look really good, you pass inspection. No, they're looking at the things that HUD says they must look at in order for that unit to pass and meet the requirements of the program. And so they are, those inspectors can be really strict. And for those of you who are landlords, you've been participating in the program, you already know and you understand what those requirements are. But for those who are new or not as knowledgeable, you need to know this, okay? Here's the third one here. Someone said to me, well, Carissa, I should be able to hire my own housing inspector. You should be able to, but when it comes to any type of housing subsidy program, again, there are standards in place, okay? And usually the agency will either send out their inspector unless they have contracted with a third-party company to conduct the housing inspections for them. Now, what you can do is to be proactive, is to hire a certified inspector who is knowledgeable. Maybe they're HQS certified, or they're up to date. They have a certification. They've taken the new training requirement through Inspire, right? So you can hire someone to come out to proactively prepare your property to pass. Here's why that's important. And I'm sharing this because I want you to be a knowledgeable and educated landlord. Here's the thing. When you are looking to fill your vacant rentals, okay? When you're looking to fill your vacant rentals, you want to make sure that it's ready to pass inspection the first time. Here's why that's important. Because every day that property is vacant, you're getting no money deposited into your bank account. So you want to be prepared. You want to make sure that all work has been completed. Don't wait until that housing inspector shows up to say, hey, this is wrong. You need to replace this. You need to fix that. You need to repair this. You need to repair that. You want to be as proactive as possible. Okay. And so if you want to take that opportunity to make sure that the property is ready, then I would recommend that you do that. But you cannot hire an inspector to conduct that inspection on behalf of the housing agency. That's not how the program works. All right. So, hello. Thank you so much for tuning in from LinkedIn. You said, do you provide an audit that can get one ready for an inspection? Yes, that is something that I currently do for rentals that are in the DC metropolitan area. And so my team and I will come out, we would assess the property just as the property will undergo a Section 8 inspection. We will come out, we would look at the entire property, we would look at the interior, we would look at the exterior, let you know what repairs, replacements, or anything that needs to be done to make sure that that rental property will pass the first time. And here's another reason why it's important, and thank you for that question. But here's another reason why that's important to do, because let's say, for instance, the housing agency comes out, they inspect the property, and they say, okay, well, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, your unit is almost ready to pass. You have to make some repairs. We're going to come back out to reinspect. You don't know the timeline. You don't know how long it's going to take. And if that tenant is only able to move in at the first of the month, sometimes that could delay that tenant to move in maybe a month later, right? And so if it is a current tenant who has to give their current landlord a 30-day notice, then that could potentially delay that tenant moving in. And so you want to be as ready as possible to make sure that your rental property is in the best condition to pass the first time. All right, so let me go to my next one I want to share today. And please know that I'm going to share my email address. You can email me and I will follow with you. And so if you want assistance, if you want help, it is available. If your rental property is not in a DC metropolitan area, there are ways that we can kind of work through whatever the needs are for your rental property, because ultimately we want to make sure that you're in the strongest position. You don't want to potentially lose a good tenant to someone else whose unit is ready to pass inspection. So you want your position to be pole position, all right, for that rental housing inspection. Next one here. The housing inspection only happens once every year. That is not true. Some housing inspections could be conducted annually. They could be conducted once a year, once every 2 years, once every 3 years. It just depends on that housing agency. Now, also, let me add this here. The housing inspection is a requirement for the participant to remain in the program. The housing agency must confirm that the property is decent, is safe, and sanitary. Okay, that's the purpose of the inspection. The inspection is not for the landlord to make sure that it's in tip-top shape for the market. The program has to make sure that it meets the requirements of the program, because if not, then the tenant could potentially have to find somewhere else to live if the repairs are not completed. And when that happens, that means that, let's say, for instance, the housing inspection takes place, they give you a whole laundry list of repairs that must be completed. They will give you time to make those repairs. If the repairs are not completed, the agency could terminate your contract with them. And if that contract is terminated, that means that you're not going to get any money. And that tenant may be issued a new voucher. Vouchers is used every time that tenant is getting ready to find a place to live. And so if the unit does not meet the criteria, if the contract terminates, they will issue that tenant a new voucher as long as the participant is in compliance. They'll get a new voucher and they'll find a new place that meets the requirement of the program. And so it could happen, the inspection, it can happen when it's the annual time, annual, biannual, triannual, whatever the cycle is, the inspection could happen then. But also, if the tenant is in that rental property, and let's say that tenant is complaining about needed repairs, maybe it's something they've been saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, my garbage disposal isn't working. My kitchen sink is stopped up. My toilet is overflowing. There's raw sewage coming up. And if there are any violations that are not completed, the tenants can report to the housing agency that they are living in substandard, uninhabitable type of conditions. The agency will come out to conduct what is called or considered a complaint inspection. And so when that happens, the landlord will be given, again, you'll be given time to make those repairs, but you want to be as proactive as possible. But I don't want you to think that the inspection only happens once a year or once every 2 or 3 years. It can happen at the request of a tenant. And then also the agencies are also conducting quality control inspections, meaning that they are following up on inspectors to make sure that inspectors are doing the right thing. So I think that's a good tool that they're using to make sure that inspectors are fair, that they're doing their job. I think they should do more of that to make sure that those inspections are conducted accurately, because I've heard a lot of complaints from landlords that say, the inspection wasn't fair. The inspector didn't look at everything. They tried to communicate to the inspector and they just acted like a butthole. I've heard lots of complaints. And so I do believe that the quality control inspections are a good tool to have in place. And so there's no problem as a landlord for you to contact the housing authority to say, hey, listen, I received an inspection. I'm not really happy. Can you send a supervisor out just to confirm? They may or may not do it, but there's no harm in asking. Okay. All right. And here's the fifth one here. I've heard landlords say, well, tenants should always be liable for making sure that the rental property passed inspection, meaning that since the tenant lives in a place in the rental property, they should be responsible for making sure that everything is okay. And while I do understand that, that landlords don't live in a property, landlords are not responsible for cleaning up, right? Landlords are not responsible for the holes in the wall. Landlords are not responsible. Then these are just examples. There's a whole laundry list of issues that can happen, right? But no, landlords are not responsible for the screens that have holes in them. The landlords are not responsible for the doorknobs that have somehow come off, right? They're not responsible for the floor that's damaged because the property condition was not like that when the tenant moved in. And so there is this expectation that since the tenant lives there, it is the tenant's responsibility to make sure they are taking care of the property. And yes, while that is true, as long as you have a tenant that is participating in any of the rental housing programs, the landlords are ultimately responsible for making sure that number one, you know the condition of that rental property. And even if the tenant is responsible for the damage, and if it is in the rental lease agreement, they should be responsible. However, you have to look at whatever the HAP contract says you must do. So, for instance, let's say that I'll use, for instance, in the kitchen, a stove. I've done an inspection, and to this day, I still don't know how this happened. I've seen this quite a few times. I'm not surprised over that. I don't know how it happens. So I've gone into some rental units. In the kitchen, the oven door, the glass part of the door was broken. It was just completely gone. Or maybe the face of that, the oven door was just completely off, right? And so, although the tenant is responsible for the damage, it is the owner's responsibility to make sure that that property is still decent, safe, and sanitary. And so, if you have to make the repairs, if you are responsible for making the replacements, you can forward that cost to your tenant if it is in writing and if it is allowable. There are some things that you are still responsible for doing. This is why I always tell landlords, please know the condition of your rental property. Don't just wait for that inspection to take place before you find out the condition of your property, because it could put you in a situation where um, you find yourself defending um, your standard, or you find yourself defending your lease. And yes, it is in writing, but know the condition of that rental property in advance. I tell owners all the time, make sure that you go out, you do proactive inspections, do your own inspection. Don't wait for the housing agency to send you a letter saying that they're coming out. Have you or your team or someone you know to conduct an inspection. And that should be for all of your rental properties. You can conduct rental inspections, and you should have it in your lease. Okay. The tenant should know that inspections are conducted and when that should happen. So whether it's once a year, twice a year, 3 or 4 times a year, the tenant should already know when you're going to conduct that housing inspection. And if you're doing these things, you already know the condition. Don't leave it up to the tenant to tell you that something is wrong. Because here's why. Sometimes tenants don't know to report that, for instance, the toilet is running, especially if they're not paying that water bill. Now, if they are paying the water bill, either way, you should make the repair. Either way, you should send a plumber out. If you're not taking care of the maintenance issues yourself, make sure that a um, plumber is going to go out to take care of it. So please understand that there are things that you can do, but then there are things that you absolutely cannot. So today, I just wanted to address the 5 myths as it pertains to the Section 8 rental housing inspections. Let me share my email address with those of you who need that information. And again, yes, we do conduct housing inspections to make sure that your rental property is going to pass that inspection the first time. So whether you have a vacant unit or you have an occupied unit and you just want to know what the list of repairs are, the work that needs to be conducted. That's my email address on the screen. Please reach out to me. My email address is info@landlordlife.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Please make sure that you are tuned in each and every Monday. I promise to share information for landlords as well as tenants to help the entire rental community. I enjoy doing this. It costs you nothing but your time to show up and get this information. Now, if you want additional services, we are able to offer that for you. Please contact me. I've shared previously that I have a landlord community that you're able to join. We have free live discussions. There's training. There's Q&A. It costs you nothing to join that community. In that community, I'm able to do a deeper dive, answer questions for you all. And so if you are interested in that, please email me. Again, this is my email address on the screen, info@landlordlife.com. If I have any last minute questions, please drop it in the chat box so that I can answer your questions today. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm live on Facebook. I'm live on LinkedIn. I'm live on YouTube, and I appreciate all of your feedback. Let me know if this was valuable for you. And again, I would also like to know if there are any other subject matters that you would like for me to cover. I recognize that my viewers are not all in the same area, which is why I always ask where you tuned in from, right? Because the laws are going to be different depending on what jurisdiction you're in. So whether you're tuned in from New York, DC, Maryland, the Carolinas, Georgia, California. I love to know where my viewers are tuned in from because I want to provide value for you and your rental property. If you are a tenant, and I know that some of you are, and if you have questions, you can drop your questions in the chat box and I will respond to you as well. This is what I do each and every Monday, right here at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Well, unless I have any pressing last minute questions, comments, remarks, or observations, I will assume that there are none. And since my time is up, I do want to thank you for yours. Okay. So again, please make sure that you tune in. That's my email address. Anything that you would like for me to cover, just let me know. I'm happy to do so. And again, I do not give legal advice. Okay. But I always give the industry's best tips and practices for landlords as well as tenants. Is that all right? October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I just want to say that please be mindful. Please show your support if you can for those who are impacted in the community as pertains to breast cancer awareness. And also, I want to say happy birthday. Give a shout out to everybody that's celebrating a birthday in the month of October. All right, want to celebrate you. Listen, I'm your girl, Carissa, the landlord and tenant expert. This is what I do. I do love and appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you all next Monday right here on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well as YouTube, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And a reminder, go to my YouTube page, smash that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to know when I'm live and online. I'll see you all next week.